All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I see the numbers increasing with our attendees, so I will wait just a few more seconds, about 26 more seconds as everyone is trickling into the Zoom room. Welcome, welcome, welcome here on this Friday afternoon. Hopefully, everyone's school year is going well. All right, it looks like our numbers are stable, so we will get started on our first webinar, which is Tools for Math Success series. My name is William McGee, and I'm the Deputy Superintendent of the Building Educational Success Together branch. I believe you'll see some information on the next slide. And on behalf of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman, I give greetings and I welcome you all here to this webinar. This series is a vehicle to advance the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman's Moving the Needle initiative and provide educators, administrators, and instructional leaders with the tools necessary to improve student learning and outcomes in math. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that all registered attendees have access to the box.com link that contains the resources of materials referenced throughout this presentation. I invite you to take a moment and click on the link in the chat to access and review the list of materials before we begin. We also have established a Q&A for questions. We will not be able to answer questions live during this webinar, but we will capture questions and generate an FAQ document that will also be made available in the box folder. For those of you who are streaming this webinar, the resources will be posted to the Mathematics Framework webpage after this webinar. We do ask for patience as it may take a week or two before all resources are available, and a recording of this and future webinars in this series will be available on the webpage. We're excited that you're joining us in the name of student achievement for all children, inclusive of our Black and African American students, our students with disabilities, our American Indian students, our boys, our girls, everyone that you all serve. We thank you, and I thank the team for getting the webinar together, and we look forward to listening and learning as well as your comments and questions. Thank you, and you guys have a great day.
Thank you for kicking us off, Deputy Superintendent McGee. We appreciate you for the work that you do and the leadership that you provide to us here at the California Department of Education. Hello, everyone. So today's agenda is action-packed. Looking forward to having this webinar and sharing this information with you. And as you're going through this information, feel free to take this information and share it out amongst your networks, especially to those who can't be here, who can possibly build off of this information to affect change and move that needle. Now that we've had a minute to familiarize ourselves, I think we're ready to kick off the event. We'll start with a brief overview of the 2023 Mathematics Framework and an update on the mathematics instructional materials adoption. From there, we'll hear from representatives from the Assessment, Development, and Administration Division, the Special Education Division, and the Santa Barbara County Education Office. So on the next slide, we have our presenters today. So we have myself, I'm Dr. Mike Torres. I am the Director of the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division. Presenting today also is Dr. Mal Vang, the Director of the Assessment, Development, and Administration Division, Dr. John Birch, Education Administrator in the Special Education Division, Dr. Jennifer Bentley, Education Administrator of the Standards and Curricular Guidance Unit within the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division, and Ellen Barger, Associate Superintendent of the Curriculum and Instruction at the Santa Barbara County Education Office. So I'm going to start us off with a mathematics framework overview. We're super excited about the mathematics framework. We know that it got adopted by the State Board of Education in 2023, but there's still buzz around the mathematics framework, and we love to contribute to that body of knowledge. So there are multiple core ideas of the mathematics framework. So I'll go over those very briefly. The mathematics framework provides detailed guidance to educators on how to engage all learners. As Deputy Superintendent McGee mentioned, all of our students, it doesn't matter of ethnicity, it doesn't matter of their gender. The goal of the mathematics framework is to engage all learners in the mathematics content area, because it is a topic that many struggle with. These new key areas of emphasis underpin the California Department of Education's messaging around the new framework. The framework takes the stance that all students are capable of achieving success in mathematics, and that success would look like all students becoming inclined and able to consider novel situations, either arising within or outside of mathematics, and doing so through a variety of appropriate mathematical tools. Students would then be able to use those tools to understand new problems and situations, and in the real world, use their own understandings and abilities to take action. At all levels, there's an emphasis on equity, the idea that mathematical power is not reserved for a few, but is in fact available to all. Teachers are encouraged to build from the cultural and personal assets that students bring with them to the classroom, and to emphasize the kind of growth mindset that develops persistence in the face of struggle. The framework also structures the teaching of the state of mathematics standards around big ideas at each grade level that integrate rather than isolate math concepts, which is a best practice in high performing countries. These big ideas enable rigor, focus, and coherence across grade levels. The framework also encourages the integration of the standards for mathematical practice. For those of you who remember and love the previous mathematics framework, that framework included emphasis on these standards for mathematical practice, and they continue in the 2023 mathematics framework. It employs drivers of investigation and content connections, however, which are new to this framework to help educators design instruction in inquiry-based and meaningful ways. We'll take a closer look at the role that these play in high-quality math instruction as we proceed through this presentation. The framework also encourages students across the age spans to become proficient at understanding and using data. That's a key skill in the 21st century job market. This provides the opportunity for a greater emphasis on statistics across grade levels, an area of mathematics that has received insufficient attention in the past. And lastly, curriculum designed under the framework should connect learning to the real world through authentic examples and problems, prompting students to ask and answer meaningful questions. Adding this kind of authenticity to lessons sparks student curiosity, inquiry, and problem solving, while also helping teachers answer one of my favorite questions that I always received as a math teacher: why do I need to learn this? Multidimensional instruction will employ the use of numbers, equations, graphics, and words, as well as student movement and touch, different forms of expression, and multiple representations of mathematics, all of this to increase access to mathematics for all types of learners. The framework contains many examples to help teachers as they plan multidimensional learning experiences, including information on enhancing instruction through the use of technology and distance learning. And finally, very importantly, the framework lays out pathways and course options, ensuring that all students can access higher mathematics as far up as calculus at the high school level. It also expands high school math course options to encourage more students to go beyond minimum course taking requirements and draw them into mathematics teaching and learning. So that's a brief overview of the core ideas of the mathematics framework. We're going to transition now to the 2025 mathematics instructional materials adoption. And I'm happy to reintroduce Dr. Jennifer Bentley to talk about that adoption.
Thank you, Mike. So to reach this goal that Mike talked about of deep, active learning of mathematics for all, the framework encourages a shift away from the previous approach of identifying the major standards or power standards as focal points for organizing curriculum and instruction. Instead, it now encourages teachers to think about the TK through 12 math as a series of big ideas that across grade levels enfold clusters of content standards and connect mathematical concepts such as number sense. And as Mike also mentioned earlier, teachers are encouraged to teach those big ideas in multidimensional ways to meet varied student learning needs. Big ideas also aim to open the door to connectedness, clarity, and engagement with students. To help teachers consider how to design instruction to support the big ideas and student investigations, the framework suggests using guidance related to the why, how, and what of mathematics. And per the framework, lessons will teach the big ideas using a formula of drivers of investigation, standards for mathematical practice, and the content connections. One or more of the three drivers of investigation, so there's sense making, predicting, and having an impact, provide the why of an activity. California's 8 standards for mathematical practice, or SMPs, provide the how, and 4 types of content connections, the CCs, which ensure coherence throughout the grades, provide the what. We're going to dive into the instructional materials adoption over the next couple of slides. And I wanted to kind of begin with the purpose of the adoption. The adoption process ensures that every student has access to high quality math materials that align with the 2023 mathematics framework. The materials have to provide promote reasoning, problem solving, and conceptual understanding for all learners. So how many programs participated? Several publishers submitted their materials for review, and through a rigorous evaluation process, only those fully aligned with state criteria made the approved list. You can find that list of approved materials on the California Department of Education website, and it has the full list of adopted programs that districts can use to select materials that best fit their students and teachers' needs. How does this all tie back to the math framework, though? Well, each adopted program reflects the framework's vision, connecting math to real-world thinking and supporting learning that's coherent, engaging, and equitable. Finally, what does all of this mean for teachers on the ground in the classroom? And basically, these materials are designed to support instruction, not add more to the teacher's plates, by giving them tools, structure, and flexibility to bring the framework to life in their classrooms. So I kind of also want to talk about the purpose behind the adoption in the sense of like why it matters and what it's designed to do. So first we have alignment with standards. At the heart of the process of adopting textbooks is ensuring that every program that we use in the state of California is consistent with California's academic content standards. And this includes the California Common Core State Standards for mathematics. This means the materials support what students are expected to know and be able to do at each grade level, not just memorizing procedures, but really understanding why math works the way it does. A next category that reviewers looked at was equity and access. This adoption is about making sure every student, no matter where they live or what school they attend, has access to the same high quality standards aligned resources. We want materials that support diverse learners, provide meaningful entry points for all students, and reflect the inclusive vision of the mathematics framework. Then we looked at support for educators, and teachers are always at the center of this adoption process and of this work. And the adoption provides vetted, research-based materials that make it easier to plan and teach effectively. Resources that encourage student engagement, rich discussion, and problem solving. It's about giving teachers tools they can trust so they can focus on what matters most, which is great instruction. Finally, we have the public accountability portion. California's adoption processes are intentionally transparent. There are opportunities for public review and input at multiple stages. So we have the community, educators, families, all having a voice in ensuring that the materials we select truly serve all students in their pursuit of mathematics knowledge. So in short, the process isn't just about choosing textbooks. It's about ensuring alignment, equity, support, and transparency. All of this is done so that California students can experience mathematics learning that's rigorous, meaningful, and accessible to all. All right, so let's take a look at the numbers behind the adoption process. A total of 67 different instructional materials programs were submitted for review. That means 67 different sets of materials for publishers who wanted to show how their resources align with the California Math Framework and standards. Also, it means that 67 different sets of materials from publishers were sent to our reviewers to review during the summer. And then after that thorough and collaborative review process, 64 of these programs met the criteria and were recommended to the Instructional Quality Commission for approval, and then went to the State Board of Education for approval actually yesterday. That's all a really strong indication that publishers really took the guidance of the framework seriously and incorporated it into their programs in a meaningful way for student learning. Like I said, the final approval came for the State Board yesterday, making the official step, moving those materials onto the official state adopted list. And speaking of that list, that approved programs will be posted on the California Department of Education website. So every district and educator can easily access the information that's on those lists as you begin your own local adoption process. So big picture, this wasn't a quick or casual review. It was a careful statewide effort to ensure that the materials now available to the districts, or that will be available to the districts, truly align with California's vision for high quality and equitable math instruction. Okay, so I do want to take a look at we've looked at the purpose and alignment of the adoption. We looked at the process, and now I want to talk about how the adopted materials align with the California Mathematics Framework. The framework really served as our roadmap. It defined what high quality math instruction should look like in today's classrooms. So when the materials went through the adoption process, reviewers were really looking closely at how well they reflected that vision of the framework. And first, materials were organized around major conceptual ideas, those big ideas of mathematics that I talked about earlier. And that meant that the content isn't just a long list of disconnected topics for students. Instead, it was structured in a way that helps students see how mathematical concepts build on each other, how one idea naturally leads to the next. And this coherence really helps students make sense of math, not just memorizing how to do problems, but really like what's the deep sense making that's happening for students in mathematics. Second, the materials needed to promote the standards for mathematical practice. And these are habits of mind we want students to develop. Things like making sense of problems, reasoning through them, communicating their thinking, and connecting ideas. The best materials don't just include these practices, they weave them in naturally. So students experience math as a process of exploration and discovery. And then finally, accessibility and equity are at the center of everything we do, including this mathematics adoption. So the framework emphasizes that all students deserve meaningful access to high quality learning. That means materials should support multilingual learners, students with disabilities, and students who come to math with different experiences and strengths. The goal is to create inclusive learning opportunities where every student can engage, persevere, and succeed. Finally, let's talk about how these adopted instructional materials actually support educators in the classroom. At the most basic level, these materials serve as the primary learning resources, the core tool teachers use to help students access and engage with the content outlined in the California Common Core state standards for mathematics. But they're more than just like a textbook or a digital platform. They're designed to support effective instruction, giving teachers lessons, tasks, and examples that promote reasoning, collaboration, and rich mathematical discussions amongst our students. They help to bring the standards for mathematical practice to life. So students aren't just doing math, they're thinking mathematically. These materials also promote student engagement. They include meaningful, relevant problems that connect math to students' everyday experiences, engaging curiosity and persistence. And just as importantly, they help teachers create inclusive and accessible learning environments for all students, whether it's scaffolds for multilingual learners, supports for students with disabilities, or strategies for differentiating instruction for our advanced learners. And these materials are built to accommodate the diverse needs of every classroom. So that was all about the framework and the adoption. I will now throw it to Dr. Mao Vang, Director of the Assessment Development and Administration Division, to discuss mathematics assessments.
Thank you, Jennifer. So now for California's Mathematics Assessments and Resources, I'm Mao Vang, Director of the Assessment Development and Administration Division. I will provide an overview of the Smarter Balanced summative assessment for mathematics that all students in grades 3 through 8 and 11 are required to take, and the assessment related resources that are provided by CDE free of charge to California educators, and they're optional to use. No adoption by the State Board of Education was required. We provide them readily. We will provide QR codes with links to the resources for this part of the presentation. Next slide. With California's comprehensive assessment system of assessments consists of 3 main parts or components: the end of year assessment or summative assessments, the interim assessments, and the tools for teachers, which is the formative assessment component. And all 3 of these components of the system are meant to be used together to support the teaching and learning of state standards throughout the year, with the ultimate goal of students being ready by the end of high school for college and career. And each component is accompanied by resources to enhance both the educators' and students' experiences in using them. Next slide. So what's inside a Smarter Balanced assessment score? The summative assessment for English language arts and mathematics in particular for this webinar is that each of these assessments consists of 2 parts. So a computer adapted test, or CAT, which adapts each question to a student's performance, enabling the assessment to capture more precisely and measure student achievement with fewer questions. And then a performance task, or PT, which includes more open-ended constructive response questions that require the use of higher order thinking skills, problem solving, and the evaluation of real-world problems. Students receive an overall scale score, an achievement level, subscores in 2 areas, an essay performance score, and Lexile and quantile measures. The student results are shared with students and parents and guardians, educators, local educational agencies, and various interest holders in ways that support a clear understanding of our students' performance and their achievement. The content of the Smarter Balanced assessments is composed of distinct individual areas for English language arts. I'll reiterate those here as well. The areas or claims are reading, writing, listening, and research or inquiry. For mathematics, those areas are concepts and procedures, problem solving and modeling and data analysis, and communicating reasoning. So individual results are provided to students and parents, guardians through the CASP or California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress Student Score Report. And as I mentioned earlier, each student score report includes an overall scale score, the overall achievement level, subscores in 2 areas, also known as like composite claims here, and an essay performance score, as well as lexiles and quantiles. And then aggregate results are reported in the educator reporting system for educators to use, and the public for the test results for California's assessments. The adjusted blueprint, the California summative assessment for mathematics alignment to the big ideas. So for this year, there are no changes to the summative assessment. We continue, or California continues to use the adjusted blueprint for the Smarter Balanced summative assessment for mathematics. And I'll share a little bit about the details of a study that in March of 2025, the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium staff presented a summary of their crosswalk analysis of the summative mathematics assessment and the mathematics framework for California public schools to the California State Board of Education, which found that there was robust alignment in most areas with only a very few exceptions. In that study, content experts from the Smarter Balanced and as well as ETS, our contractor for the assessments, they examined how well the Smarter Balanced task models meet 3 criteria that support the richness of those tasks within the big ideas. And for data reasoning, a question to ask was, does the task model involve analyzing data? For real world application, the question is, does the task model require the students solve a problem in real life situation? Open tasks, does the task model allow for open-ended responses? So for each criterion, task models were rated as none, basic, sufficient, or robust. The key findings for each criterion were that for data reasoning, task models were rated robust in all individual grades except grade 4. Where data reasoning received a sufficient rating, highlighting that while students are often required to reason with data, there is an opportunity to provide additional supports in this area for grade 4. And then real-world application in open tasks. These task models were rated robust in all grades, showing strong integration of real-world problem solving. So the items in the item bank aligned with each target and largely demonstrate a full match of the big ideas, reflecting a very strong consistency with the core mathematical concepts of the mathematics framework. Next slide. We'll head on to the interim assessments, which is the second component of our California's assessment system. And they include the English language proficiency assessments for California, or LPAC interims, the California science test, or CAST interims, and the Smarter Balanced interim assessments for English language arts and math. These interim assessments are optional, as I mentioned. For math in particular, they're available for grades 3 through 8 in high school, and they're available year-round. And they're intended to be one component of a larger system of determining and supporting student proficiency. So this year, we have a total of 107 math interim assessments. Some of the resources available to assist the administration of the interim assessments are listed in the second column there. I'll just highlight briefly. The interim assessments lookup tool allows educators to search for all available interim assessments. It provides an overview of all available state-provided interims, including details such as content alignment, total number of items, and number of items requiring hand scoring for each assessment, for example. The interim assessment viewing system allows educators to view all available interim assessments as our students see them in the interface. So it helps them to understand the types of questions and scope of content of the interims the way students see them. The interim assessment user guide is designed to support understanding and use of both the CASP and LPAC interim assessments. It's really divided into sections which address the overall process of administering the assessment, how to use the system, the various user roles, and how to use other tools such as the teacher hand scoring system, the data entry interface, and the California Educator Reporting System. Also, the Smarter Balance interim assessments overview really includes all of the available interim assessments, their purpose, item type, and use. It lists targets assessed by each of the assessments as well. And then we do have an interim assessment video series, and it's another resource that consists of 6 modules designed to introduce the interim assessment's purpose and content, as well as like how to use related systems. So we provide a QR code to the CASP and LPAC interim assessments webpage so that you could check out all the things related to interim assessments. Next slide. Once students' results are provided in the California Educator Reporting System, or what we call SERS, that's where educators can find interim assessment results, as well as all the other summative assessment results that we have in California. It's important to note that educators do need to set up an account through the test operations management system to administer the assessments, as well as have students rostered to them in the reporting system. So there are we do offer trainings on the California Educator Reporting System, and there's also micro learning videos available as well if you'd like to learn more how to do this. And in this slide, it's a screenshot of reports that are in the California Educator Reporting System, and it shows the results for an interim assessment block. On the left, the image provides group results for grade 5 math, number, and operations in base 10. It's an interim assessment block. And on the right is an image of an individual student report, which consists of all the interim assessments that a student has taken, what the results are. So we also provide a QR code here to the SERS, or California Educator Reporting System sandbox, and it allows you to see various reports using fictitious data, and also to experience the features and functions of the system in a non-secure environment. Next slide. Tools for teachers. The third component of the system, of course, consists of the formative assessment resources we call Tools for Teachers. And it's a website that features educator-created, standards-aligned lessons, activities, and professional development resources with a focus on using that formative assessment process during instruction in the classroom. So the instructional resources and Tools for Teachers are developed and submitted by educators, our California educators, who adhere to a collaborative review and rigorous vetting process to ensure high-quality resources. And they provide targeted support and differentiated instruction embedded with formative assessment and accessibility strategies. The interim connections playlists allow educators to access the Tools for Teachers instructional resources that are connected by user-determined criteria, such as like grade level, content, area, target, and standard as they relate to the Smarter Balance mathematics interim assessment. The embedded formative assessment strategies and accessibility strategies provide techniques to help educators adapt those lessons to effectively address the diverse needs of learners in their classrooms. And the Tools for Teachers resource page on CASP and LPAC, as I provide in this QR code is to assist the formative assessment process. And there are 2 resources available when you get onto the landing page of Tools for Teachers. But full access to the website itself does require an account. And local educational agency staff members may get a Tools for Teachers account either through self-registration or through their local educational agency CASP coordinator. And you can access this and so much more by visiting our CASP-LPAC.org webpage, or again, scan the QR code to go directly there. And this concludes our assessment resources and updates. Next, we have the high quality instructional materials for special populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vang. So my name is John Birch, and I'm going to talk about resources that we have to support special populations, specifically looking at students with disabilities, but the resources and supports that work for students with disabilities also, I believe, are quality resources that are effective for all students. So next slide. So what we have just launched from the Special Education Division is a collaborative work that involved different divisions within the California Department of Education, including the curriculum frameworks, the assessment division, along with our private partner, West Ed, in developing resources in what we called an inclusive access to a diploma. So we know that while assessment is very important, that sometimes our students with disabilities have specific response methods or things that inhibit how they can be able to show their proficiency on assessments. And so what this is looking at an opportunity to be able to provide alternative means of expression, which are different ways, different methods that students can be able to demonstrate their proficiency besides just an assessment there. Again, this is targeted for students with disabilities, but we believe that these alternative means of expression are useful for all student populations to support them in attaining their high school diploma. Next slide. So just a clarifying point here, because about the same time, there were 2 initiatives that came out from the legislature around alternative means and alternative support for a diploma. And so the inclusive access to a diploma is looking at alternative means of expression and is not associated with the alternative standards. So alternative standards are looking at modifying the breadth and depth of what students are required to learn as far as the standards, but the alternative means of expression, it does not alter the standards or the rigor thereof. Next slide. So the goal of this initiative is to improve graduation rates by providing students with alternative means of expression that they can be able to demonstrate proficiency in all grade level academic areas, including mathematics, which I'll be looking at more specifically, but it also supports English language arts, science, history, social science, physical education, and also visual and performing arts. And as I said before, important thing with the alternative means of expression is that we are maintaining the rigor of the standards. So there is no modification of the standards, but it is just giving examples and possibilities for alternative ways that students can be able to demonstrate proficiency in the core classes for graduation there. Next slide. So mathematics was a core focus, a specific focus of this inclusive access to a diploma initiative, because through surveys, it was found by WestEd that mathematics is oftentimes the foremost cause of students not receiving a high school diploma. And so that mathematics was often a barrier to students. And so especially at that Algebra 1 or Mathematics 1 level there. And so we wanted to provide targeted approaches to support students in being able to demonstrate proficiency in mathematics while still maintaining the rigor. That is why we partnered with the curriculum frameworks and the assessment division there, so that we could make sure that we had that input and that we maintained the rigor of the standards while still helping students in being able to demonstrate that proficiency. Next slide. So as was mentioned earlier, that in this framework, one of the mathematics framework, one of the big things is the big ideas. And we used those big ideas in helping to identify different alternate means of expression for students to be able to demonstrate their knowledge of the specific big ideas in Algebra 1 and Geometry Mathematics 2 there. And so we really used the ideas of the big ideas instead of individual standards as we developed different means for students to be able to demonstrate their proficiency. And so emphasizing mathematical investigation around clusters of standards and not just individual standards there. Next slide. So we are also, through the framework there, we were investigating and connecting mathematics through authentic problems. So we worked at designing instruction around the investigation of authentic problems that would spark the students' interest in wanting to dig deeper and engage with the work there, and using that to help them be able to communicate their mathematical ideas through a variety range of alternative means. And again, we organize these around the big ideas. That's critically important, so that it's not a student having to show proficiency in each individual standard there, but showing their knowledge and proficiency around the big ideas, so that helps provide a more equitable access to the rigor of mathematics. Next slide. So we looked at also effective mathematical teaching practices to help deepen students' mathematical agency. And so we looked at the resources to help support classroom teachers in implementing tasks that promote reasoning and problem solving, and looking at tasks that can be solved multiple ways. Also, we looked at how to pose purposeful questions in the classroom there to be able to create opportunities for students to express their mathematical curiosity and to ask probing questions to dig deeper into the problems. Also, looking at resources to support productive struggle in learning mathematics. We know that mathematics is sometimes and often involves struggle in learning different mathematical ideas, and it takes time to grapple with those ideas before they make sense. And so looking at instructional practices that help support that and encourage that. And then looking at trying to encourage student thinking and providing a platform for students to discuss their thinking and be able to acknowledge what they're doing. Next slide. And so I encourage you to take a look at the resources that we have in this inclusive access to a diploma. As I said before, I believe even though these practices were developed for students with disabilities, that these practices are effective for all student populations. And all of these resources that were developed through this initiative are available on the California Technical Assistance Network, or what we call CalTAN. And under the resources tab and inclusive access to a diploma there. And there are two areas of that. One area is a high-level guidance, and I encourage you to start there because that will kind of give you the framework for what these were developed for, no matter what your level of use. And then then you can move on to looking at course-specific resources. So we have resources that are specific to each graduation requirement course, including mathematics, which was the area where we have developed the most resources to support students for success. So you'll see in the chat there is the link to those resources. And again, I really encourage you to look at those, starting with the high-level guidance before digging in there. And these resources are designed for district administrators, school site administrators, and classroom teachers to be able to help support our students with disability, but all students to be able to meet their graduation requirements, including mathematics. Next slide. And so now I want to introduce Ellen Barger. She will be talk us about assessment to support educator and student learning.
Thank you, John. So in this section, if we can go back to that slide, thank you. As all of my colleagues at the CDE have shown, there's been such incredible and extensive research and resource development for improving teaching and learning in mathematics. However, documents and resources alone are insufficient to shift the collective practice that often lives within our mental models and our artifacts. And it is all of you who are here today, all 196 of you who are giving up your Friday afternoon, the site and district leaders who are creating the enabling conditions for educators to operationalize these shifts that are in the framework and all of these great resources. So as John said, I'm Ellen Barger, Associate Superintendent at Santa Barbara County Education Office, and all-around math junkie. So I'm going to do this next section with you so we can talk about how to put some of this into practice, into your context. As John just asked, if you haven't done so already, please download or open the box resources because we're going to have some interactive elements. Next slide. So as you heard Dr. Malvang talk about, in March of 2025, the State Board of Education did receive this report, this study that was meant to examine the consistency between the big ideas in the framework and the demands of the smarter, balanced assessment. And I think what's so important about this is that this is a move the needle webinar. And as such, people may be skeptical. Do all of these changes and shifts in the framework, will they make a difference on the assessments? And so as you can see in the diagram to the left, the three areas that Dr. Bentley lifted from the framework, the content connections, the drivers of investigation, and the standards for mathematical practice, are on the left, and on the right are the four claims that Dr. Vang shared: content and procedures, problem solving, communicating reasoning, modeling and data analysis. And where do they meet? Through the practices, the California Common Core, and most specifically in the big ideas. So I'm seeing that people are trying to get the resources on Box. And so this is listed in there, and please let us know if those resources are not coming up. So you can take a look at that report, or I can try to summarize it in a few pictures on the next 4 slides quickly. And Dr. Vang did a great job. So on the next slide, you see there is an executive summary that says exactly what the purpose of this report was and how it looked at the task models and the summative assessment item bank. And on the next slide, as we said, we looked specifically at the data reasoning, real world application, and the open tasks. And the findings were, drum roll, wait for it, robust. More specifically, if you want to take a look at those key findings, you can find them in Table 2 of the report. And as you see on the next slide, those are the areas on the next slide by grade level of how each of the richness criteria for data reasoning, real world applications, and the open tasks. So you're like, great, Ellen, so what? What does that mean as we're moving forward? And so as you are all leaders in your sites, districts, professional learning communities, you're wondering, okay, we've got these great resources, incredible research. How do we bring it all together? And so we have a bit of a theory of action here. If we are trying to prepare students to perform at really high levels on grade level assessments and in class, then we must start with implementing the 2023 California Math Framework. But as many of you know, that's a very large document, and I'm imagining that you're asking, well, where specifically? I think that assessment is a really great place to begin because it's what's going to provide the collective clarity in your professional learning communities, specifically around questions 1 and 2. And so in Box, the second to last resource there you'll see something that says Mathematics ALDs. These are the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium achievement level descriptors. This resource has been around since 2013. It's not the blueprint to say there's this many of this type of question or this many of this type of question. What it is what it says. They're the descriptors of the levels of performance, not just in numbers. You know, we know our students score 1 through 4, but it really tells at each of the claims and more specifically at each of the targets. So I think I've given you enough time to open them, but if you're still opening them, on the next slide, I'll just say what I mean. So beginning with collective clarity for not only for our educators within a grade level, but also between grade levels, as well as for parents and for students. These achievement level descriptors will help us with the first 2 questions of the PLC, which are, you know, what is it specifically that our students need to know and what will it look like? So when you open this document, and on the next slide, I have a visual. This is page 16. If you scroll ahead to page 16, you'll see this diagram. And it starts on the left with the orange box that says overall claim. That is, in a sense, the overall score that students get 1, 2, 3, or 4. And over the past few years, we've had a shift in our descriptors of each of those. But under that, as Dr. Vang showed, there are 4 claims, and they're often thinking about the domains. They're the claims, they're the reporting categories. And for mathematics, those, of course, are concept and procedures, problem solving, communicating reasoning, and modeling and data analysis. Those are the four blue boxes. But then under each of those are what are called content categories. Those are categories of mathematical content like ratio and proportional reasoning, geometry, functions, number sense. So it's the next level that really determines how we test student learning. Most people think that we test standards, but in fact, we test targets. So in the green, you'll see that there are lettered targets, A through whatever, for each grade. And if you look at the relationship between the green targets and the purple, which are the standards, you'll see that a target might be part of a standard. It might be part of multiple standards. You can see that each target might have one or more standards contributing to it. So the targets are really the descriptors of what are tested. So on the next page, on the next slide, what I have can be found on page 41. I decided to go to 7th grade because everybody knows that the math you learn in 7th grade is the math you use the rest of your life. And 7th graders are just very cool. I was thinking, should I do 6? Should I do 7? 6, 7, I went with 7. So on this slide, what you'll see is just one of the pages. At the top, you'll see Claim 1, Concepts and Procedures. Underneath that is what was in the pink box, the content categories. And in this case, we see ratio and proportional relationships and the number system. And then what you see on the left-hand column are the targets. They are lettered at each grade level. And the letters are not correlated between grade levels. If target A in 7th grade is about ratio and proportional relationships, it doesn't mean that letter A in the other grades is around that same content category. So as I said, on the left, you see the target, and then the next 4 columns are the achievement level descriptors, or what achievement looks like or performance looks like for that target. Let's dig in a little bit more. On the next slide, here under Claim 1, Target A, go ahead and click it. Thank you. There's your target. And often we just go to level 3 to say, okay, this is what proficient looks like, or this is what level 3 looks like. But I really appreciate the fact that we can look all across the target, or all across the target, all across the achievement levels. Let's go ahead and click. Because when we take a look at the full range from level 1 to 4 inclusive, it helps us to think about, as we teach over the course of the year, these targets develop through different big ideas, through different units of study, even in different areas. So you can see this as a continuum. On the next slide, what you'll see is something that's called a threshold ALD. At the end of each content category, you'll see threshold ALDs in the column for level 2, 3, and 4. This is a description of what the minimum is to get into that level. So when I think about what Dr. Birch was saying about maintaining the rigor, this helps you to really get to the essence of what do each of those levels look like so that you can continue to plan with a UDL lens and think about all those alternative means of expression while being clear about what is the minimum at each level. Okay, so now that I've oriented you to that, I want to give you a few moments, just give you like 3 or 4 minutes to peruse either grade 7, or you might want to look at grade 3, or you might want to just start with grade 3 and look through the grades overall, 3 through high school. And so just to give you some page numbers, if you are already in grade 7, that starts on pages 41 through 44, and then goes to 49 and 52, which I'll explain in a moment. If you want to start with grade 3, that starts on page 21, goes through 24. On the next slide, one of the things that you will see is that Claim 1, Concepts and Procedures, is provided at each grade level. So that's why grade 7, 41 through 44, you're going to see all of the targets under Concepts and Procedures. But then for Claims 2 and 4 and Claim 3, you'll find those by grade band. So the 3rd grade would be at the end of the 3-5 band. The 7th grade would be at the end of the 6-8 band. And so what that means is that's why for grade 3, you would look at 21 to 24, then skip ahead to 33. If you're in 7th grade, you'll skip ahead to see claims 2, 4, and 3 on pages 49 to 52. So I'm just going to sit here quietly for about 3 minutes while you take a look, orient, and bookmark these to come back to them later. 3 minutes starting now. Those of you who are having difficulty, if you go to the box link, this is the second to last. Or no, this is the last. It's mathematics ALDs. Maybe somebody could put a direct link into the chat. One of the host or panelists might be able to do it. Oh, good. Vicki, you got it? Great. So we're on the ALDs, mathematics ALDs, and folks are looking at pages 41 through 44 for 7th grade, or beginning on page 21 with grade 3 in mathematics. About 20 more seconds for people to peruse this document, noticing and wondering how these might be helpful. Okay, so as you began to look through these, hopefully you're oriented to them, you understand how they're set up. And as you were perusing them, next slide, I imagine that you were noticing how these ALDs might be helpful for your instructional leadership. If this were an interactive session, I would ask you to all put in the chat or to come off mute and say some of the things where you're thinking about how these achievement level descriptors can be helpful. But instead, I'm going to use my mentalist activity and my powers to say, oh, some of you are thinking, wow, this would be really helpful within our PLC to start to imagine what is it that students really need to know. Individual teachers, when they're planning with each other and they're wondering, how far do I need to go? In talking with parents, okay, you get the idea. So you probably have some noticings, and you also probably have some wonderings and questions about the achievement level descriptors. We won't be taking questions live now, but please do feel free to put them in the chat and we will include them in the FAQs. So I think these are really helpful, as I said, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I've read the descriptors and really helpful, but how can we as educators, as well as students and families, see and experience and really get a sense of what the grade level expectations are, especially if we're trying to self-assess? So on the next slide, I just took this same one, target A that we've been looking at. And as you deconstruct this and you read it, this is level 3, you start to say, wow, there's a lot there. And I imagine that this is going to be in multiple big ideas, but I really want to get a sense of how far to take each of these. And so that's where I think, in addition to all of the resources that Dr. Malvang shared, I want to also call your attention to this one. So on the next slide, you'll see the Content Explorer. And the Content Explorer, down in the lower left-hand corner, you can see, you can get there at any point. All you do is you go on and you choose the grade level, the subject, the claim, and the target. Once again, this is the same one that I showed you. When you click on that, what appears is quite beautiful on the next slide, is quite a bit of information, and then all of these examples. This is only 5 of the many examples that live in that content domain and specifically around that target. So this is just great for PLC level setting, sharing with students, helping students get an idea of what they're supposed to know and be able to do. On the next slide, another really helpful element, not just for the PLC, but bringing it into the classroom, are these focused IABs. And so I think up in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that this is the interim assessment block. The focus ones are the FIABs. And what's so fascinating when you look at this, specifically for ratio and proportional reasoning, as we were talking about, is that there are items across all 4 claims. Not only what you read in Target A in concepts and procedures, but within the problem solving, the communicating reasoning, the modeling, and the data analysis. So these, of course, can be used with students with formative assessment as learning, or you can use them formative assessment for learning. And so on the next slide, as we said, they can really be used anytime throughout the year. They're shorter, used in varieties of ways. Because they are fixed form and not computer adaptive, they're great to use in the classroom collaboratively with students so that they are not just using these items for that set purpose. Yeah, so I just have here in words everything I just said. Okay, so we did a little bit of here's what and so what, and then it's the now what. So now what? Throughout the day, in implementing the 2023 California Math Framework, my colleagues talked about the importance of the big ideas. and contrasted that with essential standards. And so I want to dive into that in the next few minutes that we have. So with essential standards, we almost take this term as instructional leaders and go, oh yeah, we must identify our essential standards. But I have a few questions for us to ponder. So the first question is why? What belief is this concept of essential standards based on, this theory? And many of you know that it goes back long before we even adopted the Common Core State Standards. It actually went back to essential learnings. And the idea often was, oh, there's way too much to teach in our textbooks, in our curriculum. There's way too much to teach. So what is absolutely essential? Other folks are like, this is our guaranteed and viable curriculum. Other people are like, these are the things that we are going to marshal all of our resources and make sure that students are proficient in these areas. But on the second box here, it says, what does this mean? Well, there's the message as intended and message as received. And what it often means in practice is that there's stuff we can skip. And so I often ask people this third question. This is not as dramatic because, these didn't pop in. But the third question, especially in mathematics, when we start talking about essential standards, I would ask the question, what's a non-essential standard? And who gets to decide that a student doesn't need to learn something? Non-essential for whom? And if they're non-essential, why did we adopt them? And so in moving from the essential standards to big ideas, I also want to share with you an artifact. This is an artifact around essential standards that one of our rural districts had hired an educational management organization to help them choose their essential standards. And this is what they came up with for 7th grade. You just looked at the achievement level descriptors, and there is no way that when we choose those essential standards and get something like this, we are not getting aligned and calibrated grade level expectations. We're getting picking and choosing of teaching some stuff and not the progressions as the framework and as the Common Core standards were intended with the progressions. So, big ideas on the next page, on the next slide. The alternative are the big ideas. And just to see how those content connections, drivers of investigation, standards for mathematical practice, how those become the big ideas, on the next slide, you will see excerpts from the math framework. In the left, or up in the upper left, is exactly that. That is the why, the what, and the how. Standards for mathematical practice, content connections, and drivers of investigation. The green are the content connections. Dr. Bentley showed us how those 4 content, reasoning with data, exploring changing quantities, taking wholes apart and putting parts together, and discovering shape and space, those encapsulate everything we do from K through 12 in the Common Core standards. And so those 4 content connections are then broken down a little further into the big ideas for each grade level. That's a picture of the kindergarten big ideas in the lower left-hand corner. And when you open up the content connections, the big ideas, you can see how the standards fit in. On the next page, taking it a bit further, what you'll see is that those progressions of big ideas, I took 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. You can see that those content connections like reasoning with data, exploring changing quantities, play out in the big ideas across the grade levels. And so through the Curricular and Improvement Support Committee, we have been working on some big ideas resources. And in the box, once again, there is a link to this spreadsheet that was championed by my colleague, Van Lay, in Sacramento County Office of Education, and it will force you to make a copy. But what this tool does is it takes each of those big ideas with the content connections on the left, followed by the second column with the big ideas. It includes all of the grade level standards. And then across the top, you see those grade level standards. When you hover over them, which I'm not doing right now because this is a static picture, but if I were to hover over RP1, the entire text of the standard would come up. What's more helpful, I think, is to look at any one of those standards, and as you scroll down, you'll see that a standard doesn't exist in just one big idea, but much like you saw in the FIAB, it comes into multiple big ideas as well. And so if I'll give you a moment to just click on that. If we go back for one moment, to just click on it, you'll have to go to the bottom where the pages are, where the grade levels are. So once you make a copy, then, and oh great, thank you for just putting that in the chat. Once you make the copy, then you can scroll down to the bottom and each grade level is a tab. And that can help you navigate the big ideas and how those interface with the content connections and the standards. Really helpful for cross grade level, but also within a grade level planning. And so just on the next slide, just one more, bringing it back around to the idea of the big ideas. This is from page 13, chapter 1 of the California Mathematics Framework around teaching the big ideas. And that is to reach the goal of deep active learning of mathematics for all. This framework encourages a shift away from the previous approach of identifying the major standards or power standards as focal points for organizing curriculum and instruction, and moving toward big ideas. So in summary, as we took a look today, to prepare our students and our educators for the assessment and to get into starting that journey down the road of bringing the framework to life, you can bring some of these together. We started with looking at the report. These are clicks. We started by looking at the report. Go ahead and click. About how the big ideas and the assessment, the Smarter Balanced Assessment, work together. Click again. We looked at the achievement level descriptors, both how to orient ourselves to it, as well as how the targets across can help you with your planning. Then we dove into very quickly some of the Content Explorer, as well as the FIABs. And then finally, just keep clicking. Finally, we took a look at the big ideas and this big ideas tool. And so I hope that some of these resources today and some of these ideas will help you as a leader at your site, at your districts, to engage with the intersection of the mathematics framework and the assessment to move the needle. And so I will pitch it back to Dr. Mike Torres to close us out.
Wow, 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 wow. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Ellen. That was phenomenal. John, excellent presentation. Mao and Jen, thank you for your contributions. I think this is a wonderful example of the California Department of Education and our partners, external partners, including Ellen from the Santa Barbara County Education Office, coming together for a common goal of sharing information out about the mathematics framework, mathematics resources, mathematics assessment, and the ways in which we can plan for instruction using these resources. I truly appreciate all of that. Next slide, please. The resources that we've been talking about throughout this presentation are in CDE's Box account. It is public. You should be able to access it long after this webinar concludes. I see in the question and answer section, there's a bunch of folks that have questions about accessing Box or accessing specific materials within Box. On the next slide, we have contact information for each of our different offices that had presented today. So we have Ellen's information, John's, we have the CASP inbox for the Assessment Development and Administration Division's slides. And then for our division for curriculum, we have the CFIRD at cde.ca.gov email account. That's cfird at cde.ca.gov. Feel free to reach out about anything in this presentation, and you have our contact information there. I'm also pleased and proud to share out information about some upcoming webinars that CFIRD will be holding as part of this series. There's 4 of them, 2 in January, 2 in February. These webinars will be designed to support educators in strengthening the instructional practices and improving student learning outcomes in mathematics. This series will highlight professional development programs that have proven success in California schools. Now, while the department does not endorse any one program over another, these programs do represent the range of professional learning opportunities that are available to school districts to improve instruction and student learning outcomes. And at that, we've been collecting questions in the question and answer section. We've been answering the more logistical style. The more entailed questions, we'll be taking those, putting together some careful, thoughtful responses to you, and we'll upload those into Box for you to be able to access the answers to the questions that you've posed. And with that, I want to thank you, as my colleagues had said, thank you for giving up your Friday afternoon. Thank you for listening in on this presentation. We truly appreciate you as you serve the students of California. Keep up the good fight, and we'll see you at the next webinar.